Hey guys, Jeffrey from Headstrong Training Systems here. So today we're going to be taking a look at the deadlift. In particular, we're going to closely examine the differences between knee travel and knee flexion when hinging in the setup of the deadlift. And then in the last part of the video, I'm going to go through the exact mechanisms in the perfect way to make sure that you're hinging correctly and you're doing, performing the correct action with the knees that you should be doing. So before we get into what the knee should be doing in the hinge, I'm going to throw out two definitions at you guys. And firstly, we're going to talk about knee flexion. So what knee flexion is basically is that at the knee joint, there's going to be bending of the knee. So it could be either I've got my foot lifted and I'm actively bending my knee like so, or it could be I've got my feet on the ground and when I'm bending down, you see that my knees are flexing. So that can be classed as knee flexion. On the other hand, knee travel is very similar to knee flexion, but there's a slight difference between the two. Whereas I would define knee travel as knee travel has to include knee flexion, but the difference between the two is that with knee travel, the knee is traveling forward, like so, like as in the knees are flexing, the knees are bending, but the knees are actively traveling forward. Whereas in knee flexion, yes, the knees are flexing, but the knees are not traveling forward. And so the example might give you, say, I've got my hand here and I want to perform knee flexion during the hinge. You see that yes, as I'm going down, my knees are flexing, but they're bending at this knee joint, but they never exceed my hand. Whereas on the other hand, with knee travel, the knees, yes, they are flexing, they are bending, but my knees, they go forward and they exceed my hand. So I want to make sure that's very clear to you guys, the difference between knee flexion and knee travel, because throughout the video, I'm going to talk about when we want each. So now that we've got those two definitions out of the way, we're going to first look at an instance during the hinge where no knee flexion or knee travel occurs. And you'll see that in this part, as I'm going to push my hips back, the knees are going to flex a bit, but I'm not actively letting them flex or letting the knees travel. And so in this position, my hips are running room and that's all I've got. From this position, there is nothing I can do to get myself lower, or in order to get lower, I have to reach for the bar like so, because the knees are locked. And so you see that my torso rounds, I reach over. So that's the number one mistake when going to hinge, is that the knees are completely locked. You've locked off knee flexion and you've locked off knee travel. And so you get into this position where the hips are pushed back and there's nothing you can do. Now, the second problem, what I see often is that knee travel occurs during the initial hinge. So the initial hinge is used to maintain a center of mass, to push the hips back and to pretty much line up the barbell with your center of mass and give your hips the space to push back. Because if the knees are completely locked, there's no room for the hips to hinge back. So the knees need to be unlocked, so relatively flexed, and so to maintain your center of mass. And that way you can hinge, you can push the hips back and maintain your knee position. The error that occurs, I see people do, is they perform knee travel during this portion of the lift. So as they're going to hinge down, they're just letting the hips go back and letting the knee travel as well. And you see what happens there? See how that bar actually moved away from me? In this position, you're just squatting down. You're just squatting down into position. And so in this position, you see that I'm very upright. I've got a lot of knee travel. The bar is in front of my midline. And from this position, the first thing that's going to happen when I go to deadlift is my hips going to shoot back, because no hip torque has been generated. You've squatted down into position by letting knee travel occur and knee hips going back as well. And so you've essentially squatted down to the barbell. And this is a position where you can generate any hip torque. So that's the second error, where instead of you're executing knee travel with the hinge in the initial portion of the lift. Now, we're going to go over into how the knee should be properly moving and being executed during the hinge setup. So I'm in my starting position, I found my midfoot. The knees at this part should be unlocked. And what I mean by unlocked is not excessively flexed, but just unlocked, slightly flexed. Like you're locking on a leg press, you don't want to completely lock out the leg press, so you keep the knees slightly locked. Because when the knees are slightly unlocked, when the knees are slightly unlocked, then that creates the room in your hamstrings to allow you to push the hips back and hinge down into position. The biggest thing here is that as you're pushing the hips back and hinging, the knees, you allow them to flex. So you're allowing the knees to bend, but you're not letting the knees travel. The knees are not going forward, they're only flexing. So you see how they are bending, but they're staying behind my imaginary hand, my imaginary box here. They're staying behind. They never travel forward in front of that line. And that's the difference between knee travel and knee flexion. And so after you've hinged into position and you've got all the room out of your hips, From here, then we're going to load down into the midfoot, and now we allow knee travel to occur. And that's what we squat into that bottom position. That's why the initial hinges two parts. Part one is a hinge, so we're pushing the hips back, knees are not traveling. Then once you're in position, now we let the knee travel come in and we squat down into position. So that's a super comprehensive guide of defining and the differences between knee flexion and knee travel and the common errors I see with it. And at last we've put it into action. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care.